just as you're coming back in, if you want to add a comment to the chat to share a theme that came up in your room or a comment. If you didn't attend a room and you were folding laundry, you are welcome just to make up a comment that you would have shared. But it's always nice just to kind of get a sense across groups. So to return to this idea of finishing strong, I have so much to share with you. And so hopefully there'll be another opportunity to engage in some sort of conversation. But for the next 20 minutes, I want to share some routines and strategies that have been selected because they align with SRL. So again, being responsive and contextual. And also this relational aspect that we're not looking for a lot of extra things right now. But the idea of routines is that we can be intentional and choose one or two and use them again and again. And so many of these routines that I share will be very familiar. And maybe this will just be a new lens of looking at it, or an affirming lens for the way that you approach some of these routines and practices. So the first resource that I would recommend that you take a look at is the SEL 3 Signature Practices Playbook. This was written in collaboration between CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. I feel like I'm a commercial when I say that, and the Oakland School District in California. And what this collaboration was looking at was how we could embed opportunities for SEL in our practices in a learning sequence. So not just like we do a check-in at the beginning of the day and an exit at the end of the day, but anytime we're about to engage in a learning sequence, we have some sort of grounding or welcoming, inclusive practice. So you might do an emotional check-in, you might have a mindful moment, this might be a class meeting, this might be a particular ritual that you have. I'm thinking that is community support of this idea, maybe not. But definitely check out this resource. And you'll see this afternoon, we actually had a welcoming ritual, which was the compass points, right? And if you go back across the archives of this learning series, every session began with some sort of welcoming or inclusive activity, right? That situates us, that grounds us, that welcomes a voice and values each person in the learning. The second signature practice is what is basically a giant bucket called engaging strategies. And again, these are really similar, but when we, similar to what we know, familiar with what we know. But when we think about these engaging strategies, we can start to look at what social and emotional skills are practiced, developed, maybe applied when we engage in these particular strategies. So again, through the series, it's been mentioned the connect, process, transform, right? Those are engaging strategies, ways to have our learners dig in deep, like the 3-2-1, to surface prior knowledge, to notice how thinking is changing, maybe using a 2-column or 3-column journal. We are using brain breaks to co-regulate our students all the time. And so being intentional about why we might do that and how we might mobilize that practice over to our students. So they're the ones taking ownership of when the brain breaks may happen. I know, Tammy, you mentioned this afternoon you were doing a beautiful, you were able to see a beautiful lesson example, lesson sequence, and that the fishbowl was present in that lesson. And what an amazing opportunity to build social awareness, to build perspective-taking skills of students. So any cooperative learning practice builds those social and relational skills, and also builds some emotional regulation as you have to hold back and just observe what's going on. Lots of different strategies. Again, take a look at the resource. The last one I'll mention is the optimistic closure, which doesn't mean that we're just cheerfully ending something. And I have to say, I really struggle with the optimistic closure because I'm usually like fired right up to the end of the time, and then I'm like, oh, okay, we're done. Okay, good. Whew, next thing. And so I often don't give a moment to pause and reflect. But this is really what the optimistic closure is that at the end of a learning sequence, whenever that is in the time of the shape of your day, whenever that is, that we actually pause and we reflect on our learning. So we're building that metacognitive skill of noticing what we've learned, noticing some strengths, maybe some stretches, maybe writing in a reflective journal, having an exit slip so that way we can collect some data, and so on. So take a look at that resource available to you, lots of content there. It's great for adults as well. But I also want to turn our attention to thinking routines. And particularly when we're thinking about engaging practices, engaging routines that we can return to again and again as we finish strong throughout the year. I want to make explicit the connection here, not only with self-regulated learning, but specifically with social and emotional learning. So as we go through these routines, as I share them with you, maybe for some of you as you revisit them, think about what social and emotional skills do you see applied or practiced when students are engaging in these strategies, in these routines, pardon me. And if you think back to the beginning of the session, Leighton spoke about learning intentions, right? That we often share our learning intentions with our students. And it's so much more powerful if the students can co-create and understand what the goal is of the learning that they're doing. And so with cooperative learning, for a long time, we've talked about being explicit around the social goal. But what if we made explicit the cognitive goal, maybe the emotional goal, or the social and emotional learning goal? So that's what I'm asking you to do right now, is make explicit your connection between what social and emotional skill you see being taken up and applied in the thinking routine, and how you might communicate that with your students as they practice these routines. So the first thinking routine to share with you is a See, Think, Wonder. Now, I was hesitant to share this first because I feel like when I say this, people are like, oh, seriously, this? And I feel like, yes, seriously, this is amazing. When we can effectively use a See, Think, Wonder, when it isn't just a one-off thing that we do, and our kids are like, well, that's all right. But when we use it and it becomes a routine, we can really hone incredible thinking and communication skills. And when we can make this thinking visible in ways that others can see each other's thinking, we can build perspective of what our peers might notice that's different than us. We might be able to celebrate that diversity of thought. We might notice how someone else's thinking influences our own. Right? So there's that social and relational aspect as well. So folks, I invite you to play along with me here. Here is an image. And what is it that you see? Maybe pop that in the chat box. What do you see? And I invite you to really practice your regulation and attend to only what you can observe. So not what you're interpreting, not what you guess, but just what do you observe? It should say fully observe and notice. And feel free to be as detailed as you can, really using your observational skills, inhibiting your desire to interpret what this is or what you already know about who this might be. And for the sake of time, we're going to jump to the next question. So now interpreting, so moving from observation to interpretation. What do you think is going on? Or what does this make you think about? So this is your chance to interpret what you see and make some sense of it. Thanks, Sienna, for noticing the connection. I was trying to weave a theme. And then lastly, what is it that you wonder about? So this is your chance to move your thinking to be more divergent, to be more curious and open. As you've taken in this new information about what you see, how you've interpreted it, what wonderings might you have? So we're going to debrief this in just a moment. But you might be thinking, well, Miriam, I thought this was about social and emotional learning and not just like critical thinking or, evaluating and observing. And so in a classroom, you might be sharing this again to build some social awareness of how people interpret images in different ways and so on. But you might also make this more of a social and emotional lens for this image. And so you might ask questions like, what do you see? What do you notice about this man's facial expression, about his body posture? You might ask, what do you think this person is feeling based on what you see? So interpreting an emotion, because we do this all the time. We don't have a lot of cues, just kind of what we see sometimes. And then you might just ask, what does this make you wonder? What other information might you need in order to be more accurate in your perception of how this individual might be feeling or what's going on? So that's a very particular social and emotional learning kind of lens, which is different from the more traditional see, think, wonder. But both use the routine and can be applied in any practice. Does anyone know who this really is? No. Okay. I'm going to leave it a mystery for now as you start Googling. Okay. So another example, this comes from Lorna Freeman. So she was in her social studies class, she started to study, she was beginning the study of Japanese internment. And so she also did a gallery walk with a see, think, wonder. So kids went around with their clipboards and then they documented what they observed, what they interpreted, and what they were wondering. And this was at the beginning of a unit. And then they shared that out in the class. And again, it's a beautiful provocation. I love this example. This was done not with an image, but the students were given a poem. And April is Poetry Month. And so we've got all kinds of rich text. And you can look closely at text and maybe share a phrase that you see, that you think, that you make a personal connection and a more collective connection to. I just wanted to share this example because it is, sometimes we think see, think, wonder is for elementary learners and maybe we can extend it up to middle, but here's an example of university engineering students who are looking at fans and what they notice there. Again, so applicable across any discipline, relevant to any age. If we want more of a social justice lens, there are so many rich provocations, of course, right now that we could look at here. So this was a see, think, wonder where the students did a chalk talk, right? Which is another visible thinking routine that collects and makes visible how people are responding to each of the images. And then another local example from Maywood as they were exploring residential schools. The partner, the cousin of this particular routine is the Think Puzzle Explorer. And the Think Puzzle Explorer, I also really appreciate because it moves away from know, like the KWL, know, what do you want to know, what did you learn? And part of this is simply the phrasing of it, and it looks more to growth mindset, where it's what do you think you know about this topic? Before, when we say, what do you know about this topic? It feels like, oh, I know it or I don't know it. I'm right or I'm wrong. But this is like, actually, what I think I know about this topic might actually be completely inaccurate. And that's okay. That's what my knowing and understanding is right now, right? And so this is what I think I know about this. And then, of course, it provokes sort of, again, that divergent wondering, like, what puzzles do we have about this? And how might we explore this? So moving towards inquiry. So just to tie this back to social and emotional learning, the see, think, wonder. I asked you all to be holding in your mind what social and emotional skills might be practiced and applied just from that singular routine. And this is what I think has potential to be taken up and applied in that particular routine. Let's look at another one. Actually, let me show you with Think Puzzle Explorer really quickly. One great example. So this example, again, keeping in the idea that it's Poetry Month, and maybe some of you at this time of year are exploring poetry. This was a duolingual poetry, Spanish, not French, but we can make it context specific. And so the students were given poems as provocations, and they were then invited to read, reflect, and then share what they thought about it, what they were unsure about, and how they might learn more about the content of the poems or the poets. And I just think it's such a beautiful way of collectively working towards an exploration, right, around this particular theme and poetry around the poets. All right, folks, how are you doing? You doing all right? Got a couple nods, okay. I'm just going to share this example as well. So this is called the color symbol image. And again, I love this thinking routine to not only build awareness of how we're making sense of things, but also to build a social awareness of how others see the essence of an idea. So after you've been talking and learning about a particular topic for a while, the CSI is a great way to dig in to a concept. And so ultimately, whoops, you're thinking about the big ideas of the learning sequence, of that theme, and you choose a color that you think best represents the essence of a particular idea. Or you choose a symbol that you think best, then you choose a symbol that best represents the essence of that idea, and then a sketch. Adolescents love this. It is challenging at first because sometimes our symbols are simply emojis. I think it's hard to kind of nudge thinking past emojis as the only symbol we have. And so there needs to be some work maybe to support them in that way about metaphorical thinking and representational thinking. But I'm going to share an example from Melissa Burdock, who I know was here. I think she might still be here. But she was studying residential schools with her students and gave the provocation of the CSI. And so this is a pretty high level response. So I want to keep that in mind. And it was done in French. And here's the English translation. So just give you a moment to read that. Sorry. And you're welcome to pop a response into the chat of what you think or feel when you read the student's work. I think it's so powerful. I will share one routine as Leighton looks at the clock. I will share this last routine. I have so many more to share, so another time. But this is another powerful thinking routine. This routine has been highlighted recently by Sarah Ahmed. And so again, a great way of looking at social justice issues in our classrooms. And really, it's all about noticing how our thinking changes. And isn't that amazing for us, for adolescents to be empowered to know they don't have to think the same thing, but it can change, and that's okay. And actually our thinking can change because we hear different stories or we learn to understand things in different ways. And so it's a very simple sentence stem. I used to think whatever, and now I think this. And this surfaces in my thoughts all the time because I realize as I'm growing and learning, my thinking is always changing. And so Sarah Ahmed recommends having journals that are about I used to think and now I think. And she pairs this with current events. It's such a powerful place to start with our adolescents, but you can pair this with anything. It can be the content that you're covering in your class. But what an engaging way for students to be listening to and sharing news that's important to them. Often you can have a news reporter in our class, and then they have private writing time or drawing time to document what they used to think and now what they're thinking. And this journal is only to be shared when they confer with the teacher. It's not to be shared all the time unless the students choose to do that. And so she has a few additional questions that extend that. But for now, I need to be mindful that Layton is regulating fiercely, knowing the time is winding down. And so I just want to give you a huge thank you for listening and being here this afternoon. Feel free to email me or tweet me if you want more content, but this is Foja Singh, the oldest marathon runner in the world, and he kept going. And so this afternoon, I hope you all keep going towards the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. So great to have you here. I'm going to close us up, everybody. I'm going to finish this. We're going to finish up. There we go. So friends, colleagues, are you ready for it? Froligs, thank you for participating in this year's webinar series, for connecting across the province and beyond, to share your practice, to be connected, to draw some ideas, but more importantly, just to reaffirm that what we do is special in middle, that our middle years learners can do things that they couldn't do yesterday. And our job is to nurture them and support them to grow as their brains and their bodies and their understandings are just changing so quickly. I used to think, and now I think, is a perfect activity or reflection opportunity for our students to help them see how they are growing, how they are learning. Across the series over these 2 years, we've really taken up these ideas in a variety of ways. And we hope you can really see the connections between valuing diversity, active and personal learning, and supporting kids through ongoing assessment. We just want to highlight today how much of this was about helping kids gain insight into themselves and how to learn to be with others, and that we think in different ways, and that makes us stronger. We really appreciate you finding the time, making it work, landing in a breakout room and embracing others. Through the email system where you got the word for today's session, we will be sending out a very brief, harmless, painless survey just to help us see if there's interest to continue again next year, and what we might focus on. And if you're looking for related resources, we've been highlighting the Green Book all the way along. And that brings us to 4:45, everyone. Unbelievable. Tammy, do you want a final word?
Just huge gratitude. Thank you so much to Layton and Miriam for being here today and inspiring us as we look ahead to the next couple of months. So just so much gratitude for all of you for being here. We know it's really busy and it takes time for you to commit to being here with us. So we're better together, and we're grateful that you're here.
Well, thank you to Tammy and Dave and SD61 for hosting this and making this available to everyone. And should you want to review the slides or the video today or related resources, they will be on the SD61 Middle Years webpage, which will come out to you in an email. So you get that every time, about a week later, right? Here's the stuff. All right, folks, have an incredible weather-tastic evening, and we can make it to the end. Justin Hawkins, I see you in my screen. We can make it in all the time zones of this province. All right, take care, folks.